to a new feature of All About Beer magazine. It's live beer tastings with some of our best friends in the industry. Today, we're going through probably one of the rarest things out there now. It's the Lost Abbey box set. And as our guest, we have Tommy Arthur, who is not only a featured columnist of All About Beer magazine, but one of the major talents in the barrel aging and blending world at Port Brewery. So, Tommy, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you guys today?
Good to see you, Tommy. Thank you.
It's finally happening, right? This has been months and months in the works.
This is great.
Yep, it's fantastic.
So, as Daniel said, you guys have the ultimate box set in front of you. We're going to taste tracks 1 through 6 today. Each of the track beers in the box set was inspired by a musical selection, and because the musical selections have copyright rules and things, we were not allowed to call the beer by the song name. So we decided to go with tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up through track 12. And there's also a bonus track, which we'll go ahead and taste in the next sequence of things. Each month, last year in 2012, we produced a new batch of beer, a new blended beer, every month released on the third Saturday of the month. And the goal was to come up with a box of 12 unique beers for the consumer to take away at the end of the year. We felt that wasn't enough, so we added a bonus beer to the set at the end as well, and that's how we came up with the Baker's Dozen for 13. What you have in front of you is track number 1, inspired by Van Halen's Runnin' with the Devil. All of the track series beers had a reference to heaven or hell. Some of them had the devils as well. That was the basis for the songs that we chose and where that musical sort of selection came from. A lot of them were rock anthems, very famous. Some of them hair metal, big bands, some of the stuff from the 70s. A couple of songs from, I believe there was only one song from the 90s. That's track 7. And just had a really good time with doing this collection of beers. The goal was to showcase blending, experimental brewing, and as we went through the series of beers, really tried to have a wide range of flavors from sour to non-sour, some of them very Brettanomyces influenced. And I think the collection of beers that we put together in the box was just an enormous success for us here at the brewery. Very, very proud of what we did, and took it all the way to the end with the packaging as well.
So, just out of curiosity, how did this all begin? I mean, this is a very crazy, interesting, fun, exciting idea, and it's a year-plus commitment. What started this all off? So you were at a bar.
Yeah, I was driving home. I was driving home one night and realized that a lot of the small batch brewing that we were doing here at the brewery had kind of been put on hold as we were growing, and had made commitments to trying to grow some of the batches of beer that we produce to larger levels, and some really great small batch brewing and blending needed to happen for the tasting room to give some energy to what we were doing every month, and that's where this process came from. The goal was to showcase the blending capabilities that the brewers here have, and at the same time to make sure that we had a new beer every month available in our tasting room to really drive and really bring interest to what we do here at the brewery.
Nice.
So that's how it came to be.
Well, let's get started, Tommy.
Sure. So you have in front of you track number 1, which is a sour brown beer aged in red wine barrels. It spent about 9 months in the barrels before we added some Cabernet Franc grapes to the barrels in about September of 2011, and we released the beer in January. So it's about a year total time in the barrel. Base beer is the same base that we use to make our red poppy, so a very similar approach in that regard, but instead of using sour cherries and some of the same cultures, we actually went with a little bit less of the lactic producing cultures and really focused more on just the wild nature of the Brettanomyces. Very dry, really big red wine character to it. I love this beer. This was the very first beer in the sequence that we launched the track beers with. I think it got sort of buried in the total release because it was so early that a lot of people didn't actually get a chance to come taste it at the brewery. So for many of our people that ended up actually picking up the box sets, Some of them have never tasted this beer. Just really rich and full of red wine character.
Well, it's gorgeous.
Delicious.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And a very pretty colored beer. It's hard to describe sort of over the internet, but there's a really interesting red hue that comes from the actual grapes. We crushed the grapes and added them whole in the barrels, and so we were on the skins for about 3 months. And there's a definite color gain that came from being in the barrel for 3 months with the skins, and the wild yeast.
Did the grapes bring any wild yeast strains with them?
I'm sure that they did. We've done some grape beers in the past and not added wild yeast to the barrels, and definitely have picked up some wild yeast and character from that. But there was a real emphasis to put that wild yeast in play, and so we pitched pretty heavy. I mean, there's quite a bit of that. We didn't rely on the residual character in the barrel to bring that forward. This was an added touch for sure. Quite tannic, very dry. Part of that's from the skins themselves, and just the beer drying out. The Brettanomyces really ate up almost all the residual sugar in the barrel, and so you got just a really stable, firm, sour-based beer.
Tommy, at various times you and I have talked a little bit about the different Brett cultures that you have, the different strains you have.
Yep.
This tastes to me like one of the less funky ones.
Yeah, this is actually the Bruxellensis strain, which is one of the more predominant strains you find in Belgian brewing. This is not one of the tamer ones, although it has a nice level of texture. It's not overly, I guess, barnyardy or funky in that regard.
Not at all.
And it didn't get very tart, so I think that the ratio of Brett that we added to the barrels worked out really well, and it didn't overtake the beer itself.
Right.
Fabulous.
Tommy, how much of each of the tracks was produced?
So the goal initially was we felt we needed no less than 3 oak barrels in order to put together. We needed about 1,000 bottles in order to do each one of the track beers. Some of them go up over 1,000 into about 1,200 total bottles. So the very first beer in the sequence is this one. We only used 3 oak barrels, and at that point we determined that every release was going to need to be 4, mostly due in part to having fruit in the barrels and needing to get to a certain case total. Again, we had designed this series of beers. We knew we wanted to have 700 total box sets to be built, and we needed 350 bottles in order to do the release at the brewery every month. So we needed 1,050 bottles minimum just to get through the process. And this was the one batch of beer that we basically have none of it left. We've kept behind about 20 cases, I think, anywhere from 15 to 20 cases of each of the track beers now to sell over the tasting room bar. But we're down to having, I think, less than 3 cases of this beer as part of the entire set. So if you open up the piece that's behind you, the record collection, if you look inside the fold, it actually lists how many barrels were used and the sequences and pieces, and how many total bottles were produced of each one of these beers. And that's a really cool piece in terms of the opening. So there it lists what went into it, what the barrels were, what the cultures were used, what kind of adjuncts were a part of that, total bottles produced. Just a really nice collection of information to go along with each one of the releases. So this is the first series in the first track in the series. It also is the lowest case total that we produced. It's quite a bummer because this is one of my favorite beers in the entire sequence.
And who is this?
That is Justin. He is in the band called Dead Feather Moon. One of our brewers here at the Abbey is in the band. They're a really great local band. They're going to be famous someday. So you wait and see. That's going to have some great value. They're going to be a really great band, and the things they're doing around the local music scene here is fantastic. The art direction for that photo shoot was done by John Schultz. He's our house photographer with Studio Schultz. He's also the one that shot the most recent cover that had the Brewers Under 30 on it. He's the one that was responsible for the picture of Yiga from Pizza Port Ocean Beach as well.
Yeah, nice. Great photo.
Yeah, John did a great amount of work on this project. In fact, it was John's idea to use the box that we ended up using to put the finished beers in. So a real nice collaborative effort between myself, John on the art direction, and then Matt Taylor from Varnish Studios, who actually did all the design work for the finished pieces and really helped us get this box delivered. So I see you guys have opened up box.
We're on to number 2, Tommy.
All right, let me get there, okay? I'd also like to point out that it's not even noon on the West Coast, so I will have a much more enjoyable.
Well, you know, Michael Jackson always said your palate was best at 11 a.m.
Yeah, well, I plan on having a great afternoon. I might have to hit up the couch when we're done. The guys at the brewery are excited because they get to drink some of these beers. I'm not consuming the entire bottle, so you're making some big fans at the brewery today.
Good.
All right, so we're on to track 2, yes?
Yes. Wow.
All right, so this was an interesting beer because originally when I sort of imagined doing all 12 of these beers, I put together a syllabus, and the syllabus sort of had laid out how we were going to make 12 unique beers, what we were going to pull from, blend from, and basically 8 of the 12 beers in the syllabus were already in barrels in some capacity and really just needed some time to get to the finish line. This was not one of those 8 beers. This was originally sort of had to be culled together from different barrels and different blending processes, and this is one of those things that really pushed our brewers and our people here at the brewery to imagine a beer that we hadn't really done before. So what we end up with is a really very heavily fruited beer. There's some peaches, some cherries, some bourbon barrels, some red wine barrels, and the overriding impression in the beer is very much like a cocktail, almost like a Manhattan, with the cherry and some of the...
Yeah, nice.
So that's what we've got in track number 2.
We'll note that this one's inspired by Stairway to Heaven.
This is inspired by Stairway to Heaven. As part of the unique art piece, every one of the labels has its own original artwork that we commissioned. When I was thinking about, sort of the classic notion of Stairway to Heaven, the premise was that people were trying to buy their way to heaven. So the art and the label basically came back to this is not real heaven, this is faux heaven, and this is basically people that have tried to get to heaven the easy way by getting on the escalator to heaven and have figured out that they're not really going to heaven, they're going to hell. So a very cool piece that Sean did. Sean Dominguez is our artist, and this took a little bit of effort to imagine this one. He and I worked on this one for quite a while. Track number 1, the Runnin' with the Devil piece, took almost no time. That was from the get-go something that was very easy to imagine. Sort of growing up with the Smokey and the Bandit kind of function, and the guys running Rocky Mountain beer to the East Coast kind of deal. That's where the inspiration for that came from. Track 2, Stairway to Heaven, much simpler in its basis, not quite as cultish, but at the same time, people buying their way to heaven and falling off the escalator to heaven and ending up in hell. I was very. So it looks like you guys have the originals up on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Have you thought of, Tommy? Have you thought of going into the ministry?
If you talk to my grandmother, and she's in the None Better video that we just submitted, my grandmother actually at one point told the nuns at school that she thought I was destined to be a priest. So.
We had 12 years in Catholic school.
I've put in my Catholic time. I'm good for it, and now I'm making my daughter go through the same basics. So it's working out well. This beer was a little interesting when we released it. I was very concerned coming off of the success of track number 1, how well that beer went together. I wasn't really sure how the people here at the brewery were going to receive this beer. I just didn't really know what their reception was going to be. And when we put it on tap, or when we put it up for sale that 3rd Saturday in February, it went over very, very well. And that sort of really gave us a lot of liberty and license to make sure that as we went into more of the experimentation and the bottling and blending process, that it was okay to kind of get away from some of our roots and things that we'd already done. So this was a departure. We'd never done a beer like this in terms of packaging or even a small release, and I think it worked out really well. Tommy,
are you adding lactic bacteria to this, or does the tartness all come from the Brett?
No, this had a little bit of lactic. There was 4. I think this one had 4 oak barrels. One of the barrels was from our cuvee program, so that would have some lactic cultures to it. But it was only 1 of 4 barrels, and the other barrels had Brett. So there's a much stronger Brett presence than there is pure lactic. sort of presence. And because the beer is about 12.5% alcohol, a lot of that acidity can be very challenging to get in line. It's hard to make beers at 12.5% that have a tremendous amount of acidity to them. So definitely more oak and more Brett than pure lactic acidity, but at the same time a nice underlying tartness that really supports the cherry and some of the flavors in the beer. And you're doing the I can't believe it's 12.5% face, right?
Yes. That was it. That was it.
Yeah. I will tell you that this is actually not one of these bullshit measurements. We actually did sample all the barrels after blending and have real hard numbers. These are not guesses. So when the label says 14.65% alcohol, that is from the lab, and that is a real true number. All the labels were printed after we'd put the blends together, and so there was no guessing as to what it might or might not be. So it is really 12.5%.
Well, you're not the only one who's going to have a sort of relaxed work day after this.
Well, at least you all get to deal with the state troopers driving home. I get to sit at my desk.
Yes.
So, people ask me often, what was sort of, what was your favorite beers or what were your least favorite beers in the sequencing? And, these are all our children, right? So they're all good. I had originally, and Daniel, this gets back to your point, sort of when we imagined doing this, my goal in doing this was to really, I sort of felt like there would be no way in heck we'd miss with 9 of the beers, but there might be 3 stinkers or 3 beers that people might not really appreciate, or just in trying to do something this ambitious, we might miss the mark with. So for me, going into this project, I felt like if we could deliver on 9 of the 12 beers, we would have really done a great job. Now that we're fully through all 13 of them, I don't think we missed the mark at all. I think that everything that we put forth, we really stand behind and would have put out on the market, as a single entity. And I don't think that there's any one of these beers that we wouldn't strive to recreate again based upon what we taste and what we have in the bottle today.
So looking over the liner notes,
yes,
there's quite a broad range here.
In terms of the flavors and the bases?
Pardon me?
In terms of the beers themselves, or the...
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I wonder, it's almost like it's a short course in sour beers.
There's, I think, of the 12 or 13 beers that we produced, 4 of them are sort of not sour, but realistically there's a lot more sour beer in here. We felt that the sour beer stuff was where people would really want to put them down and hang on to them and sort of wait for them to evolve. So yeah, mostly more sour beers than non-sour beers. But in the scheme of things, there wasn't a design to have 6 sour and 6 non-sour. Again, we really just came out and said, what's the most imaginative beer we can do this month? What's in the barrels that's interesting, and what story do we want to tell, with those beers? And so we ended up with more sour just because it worked out that way. But it was never really set in stone in a hard way of, we have to have these beers, but definitely more sour than not.
Tommy, what's your experience with aging your sour beers?
We have a lot of them that we have kept behind. We've been open almost 7 years now here in San Marcos, and I have beer that goes back to 1999 when I started at Pizza Port doing some of the cuvées and things like that. It's interesting to watch them develop and sort of mature. Of the beers in front of you, we're going to get to track number 5 in a little bit, and track number 5 is a heavily fruited sour, and that's going to drop off. There's going to be a fruit quality in there that's going to, over time, kind of go away. But we're going to go, right now you're working on track 3, getting it open. Track 3 is a non-fruited sour, so it's basically blonde and looks a lot like Gueuze would from Belgium, and that's a beer that should have great stability and have a lot of long-term potential. It shouldn't devolve necessarily. The flavors that are in that beer, whether it's the oak or the acid, really there isn't a whole lot for it to drop off. So let's go ahead and get track 3 and, sort of in front of us, and we can talk about what that looks like.
We've got that open.
Oh, beautiful.
Wow.
Okay.
Tommy, Peter just said that the track 3 glows in the glass.
It's got a really nice vibrancy to it, doesn't it?
It's really good.
Where'd it go?
Remember, it's right.
Theirs are clear and ours gets cloudy. Well, no, every time. Stand back up.
So over the years at the Abbey, we've released a few blended sour beers that have had no fruit in them that have been very, very highly regarded. One was Isabel Proximus, and the other was our Duck Duck Goose. And we don't typically release a lot of sour, non-fruited beer. And so when we do, there's a very distinctive characteristic in the beer itself. And there's a lot of what we call stone fruit and even lemon acidity that kind of comes along for the ride in this beer. What's great about this beer is it really showcases the house culture, sort of the house flavor that we work with. A lot of mushroom, some damp cellar, and just a bright acidity that comes in from the barrel process.
Now, tracks 2 and 3 compared to track 1 are slightly cloudy. Track 1 was sort of brilliant and clear.
Yeah.
What accounts for this?
I don't have a real good understanding of why that beer was so much clearer, whether it was the grapes or the process, but it definitely has a brightness or a filtered sort of look to it. It's definitely not a filtered beer, but it's settled. It also, of all the beers we produced, is the oldest in terms of time in the barrel, and it being the very first in the sequence, it's just the oldest. You're looking at a beer that's 2.5 to 3 years old in terms of start of production to packaging.
Okay.
So.
Definitely getting that mushroom.
And those of you that were at the dinner that we did for CBC, this is the beer that we served with dessert. This was actually paired with a gorgonzola ice cream and was an amazing pairing. Really, really.
It was good.
Yeah.
Intimidating.
Yeah. The gorgonzola was very stinky and footy, and the ice cream was really, real butter fat and rich, and the quality of this married to it very well, and at the same time the acid cut through the fat. It was a really nice pairing. Very, 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 very pleased with the way that went that night.
Have you done an ultimate box set dinner yet?
I didn't do an ultimate box set dinner yet. We did do a single night for San Diego Beer Week in November at O'Brien's Pub down in Claremont and here in San Diego. We actually brought all 13 beers to the table and did a tasting. It was the first time we'd put them all in a line together and actually allowed everyone to taste them in running order. One of the interesting pieces of doing this box set was that there was no rhyme or reason to why track 3 is sour and yellow and track 4 is not and track 5 is this. So there's no real appreciable sort of ability to go through them and have a ramp in terms of flavor and intensities. When you drink them in order, they're all over the board. So it was a great tasting. It was really cool. About 45 people, I think, was the number that we did. And it was just a great chance to tell stories, talk about the art, the pieces, and explain to people how each track came to be. Some of the track beers were imagined to be earlier in the sequence, and some had to get moved because they weren't ready in terms of the barrel process. And so, track 3 was originally slated to be the February release, but we actually pushed it back by a month just to work on finding a couple barrels that we really liked. Again, track 2 wasn't even as part of the original syllabus, part of that set, although track 1 was always going to lead the series. So
This is really strange. Suddenly I've got a rush of pear flavor at way in the finish.
of pear.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah. This is one of those beers where I think every sip is going to have a little bit different intensity. At some point, the flavor of the oak that's pretty strong will coat your tongue, and then aromatically you'll start to pick up some different things. I mean, the mushroom's never going to go away. The mushroom flavor is very aromatic and very, very strong in front and center. But the acid level is definitely going to change as the oak is coating. There's a very heavy oak hand in this beer, very un-Belgian in that regard. Where we have way more new, fresher oak quality, and they're using a lot older barrels. But the oak makes for a very interesting contrast to that acid flavor. Very Chardonnay almost in its makeup.
Are these new barrels?
They're newer to us. They're we typically buy barrels from the wineries that have been used at least 3 times, and we prefer to get barrels that were used up to 5 times. The wineries tell us that they're oak neutral to them after 3 uses, but in reality, we bring in things to the brewery that are 3 turns from a winery, and they're very oak positive for beer. So completely different sort of reality for their needs. But you're talking about, this is a 7% alcohol beer versus a 13, 14% alcohol wine. Very different in terms of what's extracted.
And what you can perceive.
And what's perceivable, yeah. So artwork for this is inspired by Hell's Bells. Basically, the notion for the art direction here was this is the devil out at an abandoned church each night, sort of the requiem for the souls. Every night he goes out and tolls the bell for how many souls he gathered that day, and no one can figure out how it is that an old church on the hill that isn't inhabited, how come the bells keep going off every night? So done in the shadows, very singular, monochromatic almost label, blacks, reds, and a little bit of blue. A very cool label. You guys on track 4 then?
Yep.
We haven't opened it yet.
All right.
But we can.
Are we doing okay on time?
Oh yeah, we're doing great.
I'm getting pinged on my phone, so I'm going to look something real quick just to see who's sending me messages.
They're telling you to brush your hair.
That I'm brushing my hair? No, I'm getting messages from infatuated people out there, so we'll see how the stalkers of the world are treating this. Are you guys good with number 4?
We are.
We are.
All right, I'm gonna get number 4 going here.
Are you going to brew any of these again and put them into regular production?
I think for us here at the brewery, we're really looking at track 1 as being something that of the beers in this box set we would really like to be working on a yearly basis. Track 1, part of it was designed to give us a chance to see how it ages over time. It's not a big departure from some of the other things that we currently do, so it'd be very easy for us to put that in play year over year if we wanted to. And I think that the success of the beer really does move it to the forefront. That's one that we'd like to see come out and join some of the other beers that we do.
Wine. This is an interesting combination, wine and bourbon barrels.
Yeah, and it really has back when we put this out and started talking about it, it has an old world Zen character to it. There's a lot of jammy fruit and some really rich tannins that come along. This is basically our older viscosity that we produce for the port brewing side with some sour cherries added to it, and then we blended it with the red wine barrels, and the red wine barrels were our Hot Rocks lager aged in French oak barrels. So the Hot Rocks picked up a lot of tannins because it's such a low alcohol beer, about 6.5%. But what happened in the aging process is we got some new barrels into the brewery, and this is sort of what Julie was speaking about. We got some new barrels to the brewery that were 3 years, had red wine in them, 3 different turns, and then we got them into the brewery and put this low alcohol beer in them and picked up an enormous amount of tannins. And also, you asked earlier about some Brettanomyces. This has a Brett that came along for the ride in the wine barrels that wasn't part of our series. We actually picked up Brett from the winery that came on board in the barrels, and it's not a Brett that we use here at the brewery. So once we started looking for some structure to the beer to put some oak in play, that's where this Brett came from. And so not necessarily came along on the grapes that were in track 1, but it was the same winery that we got those grapes from, that these barrels came from. And in tasting, there was 3 different Hot Rocks barrels that we chose to look at. All of them had a different level of Brett to them, and even a different type of Brett in them that we don't use here at the brewery. So it made for a great quality in this beer. And I think it was an interesting blend by all means in terms of how it came together. I can tell you that of most of the track beers, this is one of the track beers that was most deadpan. People didn't really like this one. People really sort of had a love-hate relationship with this one beer.
The track was selected accordingly then.
Yeah, that's a famous song, and most people don't know the name of it, which is kind of fun. When we got to use the Sympathy for the Devil, People know the song, off the top of their head, but most of them don't know what it's called.
Really? So we just have to hear Keith Richards'
That's
intro
right.
now.
That's right.
Kids these days.
Yeah, I know. This actually might have been the hardest piece of artwork we had to imagine in the entire set, because we were trying to figure out how it was that anyone was supposed to have sympathy for the devil. So the backstory on this label basically is that the devil really wasn't doing a good job of collecting souls anymore, and his job was outsourced, and he ended up on a left turn island looking for a new job. So Change Needed has a little bit of a double entendre to it, but the devil's out there on the island looking for a new job.
That's fantastic.
You guys taste a lot of tobacco and sort of chocolate and leather in the beer?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's got a lot of firm wood character. Again, this gets back to some of the beer being really imbued at a high level by these tannins. And not all of the beers really wanted to have a big tannin kick to them. But if we're going to put this box away and we're going to sit on it for a little time, that's really going to help hold the structure of the beer up and not let it devolve too much. Some of the fruit that's in this beer, the cherry, probably will fade out over time. But at the same time, it's not a heavily fruited beer, so it should just be a supporting kind of character.
Have you put this with food?
We did a beer dinner, and they served it with a big piece of red meat. I think was the last time it got run out the door. I think when we did the O'Brien's event, they had put it in the pairing sequence with some either veal or some beef cheeks, something that was really rich. The acid's nice because it does support some of the flavors that you find in red meat, and at the same time, cutting through a little bit of that fattiness as well. But the long finish is there. So yeah, I'm guessing this is sort of your steak and red wine kind of pairing.
This is the main course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a rich beer.
It definitely is. It definitely is.
I happen to really like this one.
I really like this one.
So you guys actually like the way this works out.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah. I couldn't figure out why the people at the brewery. I think most of the people that came to the brewery may have had a different expectation, or maybe after the first three, they just weren't as wowed. I will tell you that most of the track beers we put on sale, they lasted about 18 to 20 days here at the brewery, and you could only consume them here at the brewery. So we would go through 350 bottles in about an 18-day period. When we put track number 3 up, it lasted 3 days. We basically sold over 200 bottles at the brewery the very first day it was released, and by Tuesday it was gone. So I could see how this beer, because of some of the finesse and subtleties, and it's not over the top, and it wasn't one of those beers that I think had as much wow factor as certainly track 3 did. And I think a lot of people really knew track 3 because it was the non-fruited sour. They knew that was something we don't do that often. There's definitely some notes in this beer that we've produced in track 4 before, but at the same time, I think the non-house Brett character that we've developed from the winery made it very interesting. And I think long term, this is one of the beers in the box that people will sort of forget about. It'll be sitting there, but when they open it, they'll be very impressed by how well it held up.
Was the idea for serving them only there, those initial 350, that only the people that got the box would be able to age?
Yeah. So what we tried to do is because the sort of the cult of beer these days is becoming difficult to manage at a brewery level, and a lot of breweries have challenges with small batch releases. Is we didn't want to engender a big rush to drink all the beer or to have people show up. I mean, we don't want 1,000 people showing up, on that day to try to buy only $300 or 300, beers, 300 bottles of beer. So we limited it to on-site consumption, and then created a lottery system that basically, if you came and bought one of these beers every third Saturday, you would be entered in the lottery, so that at the end of the year, you wouldn't have to wait in line to get your box of beer. It was already reserved for you. And that's how it came to be. But some people came every third Saturday and didn't buy the box set. They drank all 12 of the beers and never wanted to commit to owning the whole piece. And again, some people just showed up on random Saturdays and days after to get the beer. and some of them may have tasted 6, but not all 12 in the sequence. So interesting. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways for us in terms of, when we go look at this, can we do it again? What would we do differently? We like the once a month piece. The new beer every month was challenging to the brewery. It really made everybody sharpen their focus on getting this done, and it was no easy feat. But I think at the end of the year, it was a great way to circle the wagons and really celebrate what we'd accomplished. Every one of our employees got a box set as part of their Christmas package, and so they were able to celebrate not only every month being able to drink that single bottle, but they got a takeaway piece as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So far, I'm getting that what each of these is an artistic blending from existing barrel inventory.
Yeah, for the most part, the way that it was sort of laid out was a lot of these beers, as part of what I call the original syllabus. I knew we had extra barrels and extra opportunity to add fruit, to work things into the mix that we hadn't done. But again, in order to do this process, a lot of this beer had to exist because it had to be in the barrel, for at least 6 to 9 months before we could even talk about it being part of the year, the year later. One of the reasons we're not doing this box set again this year in 2013 is that we want to program certain elements into the next set when we go to do this. We want to have more sour yellow barrels. We want to have more brown sour beers so that we can engineer the next round of beers and not sort of duplicate and do some of those things over. A couple of the beers that are in this track series we think will always be part of the track series, meaning that's the only place you'll be able to get them. But at the same time, we want to make sure that each year there's a bunch of new beers and new opportunities for people to collect things that weren't available to them in the previous set.
How many full barrels do you think you have in inventory?
We're currently sitting at about 850.
Okay. How many of those do you think are already committed for existing beers that are basically ongoing beers?
I mean, in order to do this sequence of beers, we would have needed 48 barrels, 4 barrels per release times 12. So, 50 is not a big number to keep for experimentation and things like that. We're constantly filling barrels that aren't part of a design program. So if I had to pick a number, probably about 600 have sort of a real line basis for they're going to be part of a release in the next year. And that's programmed release, whether it's Cuvée or Red Poppy or Angel Share or Older Viscosity. And then there's just a bunch of barrels and things that we fill on an experimental level, some of which never see the light of day for various reasons, and some of which are used to do things like this and become part of blends.
Interesting.
I'll get that.
It's our fans calling.
That's right.
Too bad it was for you.
They're at the doors. They want in.
All right, so you guys got track 5 open now?
Yeah, we just opened it.
Motley Crue.
Motley Crue, shout at the devil, right?
Yep.
Every Catholic kid's nightmare.
Just a little fruit.
Just a little, yeah.
This seems to be more carbonated than any of the predecessors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is actually a little bit lower in alcohol, and it had a really high level of residual sugar. So those two things with live yeast in the bottle typically equate to, evolution over time. This is definitely going to pick up CO2 in the bottle just by sitting there because, again, you're talking about a real jammy fruit quality. In order to get that level and layer of fruit in there, you've got to have a real, just almost bombastic, over-the-top amount of fruit that we've added. And that's what this beer represents. I mean, you can see it in the color. You can see it in sort of the aroma. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. This is a hugely fruited beer.
Very.
What?
The whole room smells like.
Raspberries.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way.
So we have a couple of fruit beers that we produce every year. One being Red Poppy, that's our sour cherry beer. We make Framboise de Amorosa, that's the raspberry beer. We've never actually blended the two of them together, And so that's what we've got in this track number 5, sort of the homage to Shout at the Devil. And we basically took the framboise and the red poppy, and at packaging time added what we sort of affectionately refer to as double the amount of fruit around here. Both poppy and framboise are made with whole fruit in the barrel, and at packaging time we bring in 100% all-natural fruit concentrate, and that allows us to sort of meter and dose and really dial in the fruit quality of the beers. And that level in this beer was basically doubled. And we've never bottled that. We've done it for special events, and we know we can do it on a keg level because it doesn't re-ferment. But the challenge is taking all that fruit to package and really making sure that it's not going to become a bottle bomb. And clearly this has way more CO2 and carbonation than the others. But I think in the scheme of things, we still managed to find a level that doesn't make it gush and make it too much over the top. This is one of the beers in the sequence when people ask me, which ones should I drink first? Track 5 and Track 7 always come up because they're both very similar in terms of being very heavy-handed with the fruit, and the potential long-term for them to not taste like this a year from now is pretty high. So I always recommend Tracks 5 and 7 be the ones that people really look at in the box set first if they're concerned about things changing too much from what they purchased.
Kind of speechless.
Yeah, the room is speechless.
This was one of my favorite pieces of art that we did. One of the cool things about this was trying to imagine sort of that real stadium shot, the big rock and roll piece, which is here's the 80,000 people, at Wembley Stadium sort of screaming at the devil. And originally when I had met with Sean, our artist, I had told him that I was sort of feeling more like, we were looking out at the audience and sort of, in the sort of the perspective of shot from behind the devil. And he turned it around and put it on its sort of ears and shot it more from the crowd looking at the devil, which I like because it's more inclusive. It's more like we're part of being in that crowd as opposed to sort of standing on stage and looking out. The green light was very simple. It gets sort of back to that, real rich and vibrant color scheme and just a real, glow of lights at night. And I thought he did a great job with this label.
So what music do you listen to, Tommy? Does this
Well,
reflect
I think you're sort of seeing it, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Just about everything. You don't find a lot of country music out west or in San Diego, so we try to stay away from the countryside of life, but doesn't mean we're not talking about using Johnny Cash in the next round of things. So
Come out and visit us. We can help you.
I know. I'm sure you can. The whole point of this exercise came about. I was driving home one night and I had the iPod going, and Guns N' Roses came on, and sort of the anthem that Paradise City is, and sort of turn it up, crank it up, let it rock, roll the windows down, and this was really a lot of these songs were things that we put into play that you're supposed to play this at a little bit higher decibel than normal. So you can imagine that the brewery is filled with music most days of the week, and most of that music is pretty intense and loud, and I think that's sort of indicative of most breweries.
So no Kenny G, huh?
No what?
No
Kenny G. No, I need my guys to work, not sleep.
These rents.
Do you have any favorites so far?
Did you guys all take
that track 4?
Track 4.
Track 4 was just such a. Oh wow! That was just a big good beer, food beer. I mean.
We should have included a set of Tums, right, in the box set?
Someone's in the box, yeah.
So we.
No, you earn it. You might as well pay for it.
You're on the pilot deck. That's good.
1 and 4 seem to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1 and 4.
1 and 4.
They're really.
Yeah.
I asked if there were favorites. I don't know if you heard.
Those
Why
are.
we're saying numbers.
Those are great sit down to dinner beers.
I love 3. 1 and 3 for me.
But we haven't had 6 yet.
We haven't had 6.
Yeah, we will soon.
So we're getting to 6?
Yep.
Yes, we are.
I'll make 5 go away.
So that's
By the magic of television, I have a new glass. Woo.
Oh. Morty.
14.3.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
and it really is 14.3.
Yes.
The crowd ooze.
Barrels used American oak bourbon, American oak brandy.
Oh yeah.
Angel Share, Serpent Stout, and older viscosity. All right.
So you referenced it. We make a beer called Deliverance every year, and it's basically a blend of our Angel Share aged in brandy barrels and our Serpent Stout aged in bourbon barrels. And so we thought for this beer, wouldn't it be great if we sort of what we call played it in reverse? And you know, those of us that grew up with record players used to spin things backwards, trying to hear the devil come out of it.
All is
The
dead.
devil.
Yeah. So we took the same 2 beers. We took Serpent Stout, we aged it in brandy barrels, and we took the Angel Share and we aged it in bourbon barrels. So we have the same components that make up our regular Deliverance, but we've played it backwards. Basically, swapped the barrel aging components in terms of which beer went into which. The older viscosity was brought along just to provide a little bit more structure. It was a little bit older, and it really helped settle the beer. Both the Angels and the Serpents were quite young and very fiery. So we ended up with a boozy beer. This is the biggest alcohol beer in the sequence. This is the sort of the midpoint. So we hit the middle of the road and got to 14+% alcohol. Non-sour, non-Brett, non-everything. So this is one of the few in the box set that really should go the distance at 14+%. This thing could go 20 years, I think, no problem.
Got a lot of licorice in it.
That's just.
Is there a lot of licorice in this?
That is beautiful.
Licorice, vanilla, brown sugar.
This is spectacular.
This
Tommy.
comes from what I call the don't light a match function. Don't fire up the lighter.
Oh.
Boy.
Yeah. So I love talking about the art because it's so much fun. So this has one of the best backstories of all the art pieces we did. So, when I was growing up, vacation sort of came to light, and everybody went to Wally World. And I grew up in Southern California, and Wally World was Magic Mountain up the road. So basically, what we have in this picture is we have the Griswold family truckster. We have basically the station wagon that has left the crossroads of hell at the gas station when Clark was gassing up the truckster. He managed to run into the devil, and the devil convinced him that going to Wally World wasn't so good, and that anybody could take their family to Wally World, but not everyone would point their compass and take their family towards hell. So.
I don't
So
know.
that's what we've got going on here.
I've got some memories.
Yeah, right. I think everybody's got some summer vacation with the family in the car kind of stories, and
regardless
I
of the
certainly do.
destination, it usually amounted to hell.
Yeah, well, of course, right? So hell is the next exit. They're being guided. There's a couple of bikers, skeletal sort of biker crew. There's no chance in hell they don't get to hell here. So I like the piece a lot. I think it's really fun and just really whimsical. And Sean killed it. This is one of the most just really vibrant and rich pieces that he did.
Yeah, he did kill it.
Tony, I think your grandma was right.
Yeah, I know. I was scarred. I was in the grocery store when I was in 2nd grade, and the nuns were buying booze. I think that pretty much sealed the deal.
Oh.
This is awesome.
I'm surprised you don't show up in any of the labels.
You surprised what?
Do you not show up in any of the labels?
Do I not what to him?
Show up in any of the labels.
No, I do not. My fat ass does not show up in any of the labels. No. That's not,
I thought there'd be like a Where's Tommy kind of.
no, there's no Where's Waldo going on here.
I don't know. Some of those, that bald head of yours is looking pretty similar to some of these.
Yeah, I made Sean promise me that he would never draw me as the devil, so I think it worked out okay.
Oh, the temptation.
He tried. Trust me, he tried. I wanted to be the guy driving the Firebird, but that it really was reserved for the devil, so he did a good job with keeping me out of the labels. I get a lot of shit because I have a beer named after myself anyway, so that's the extent of it. So we'll keep it at that. So how do we do? Everybody likes the beers?
Oh,
Yes.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
I think I'm going to need to try the next
I was
set.
gonna say we're gonna go on and open the next 7 now.
Right. I mean, we could just keep going, right? You guys could just have an amazing afternoon.
Have a sleepover.
Any other questions for Tommy? No. Tommy,
We'll do this.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thank you
Tommy,
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your generosity. This is extraordinary.
Yes.
I'm glad we could finally do it, and now we get to schedule some time for the next one.
Yeah.
Do
Tune
you have
in
any
for
more
round
box
2.
sets available to sell? You should advertise them.
I think there's about 10 left here at the brewery. There's not many of them left for sure.
Well, before we sign off,
We'll take 9 of them.
Yeah.
we forgot to introduce you to everybody here, which is a gap on my part. The guy running this, Lee Hamilton, is in charge of all of our events, relatively new to the company. Chris Rice is our vice president, and he's been doing a lot of work on expanding our World Beer Festival model into many different markets. Brand new is Kelly Mahoney. She's in charge of our marketing. Quite a great writer. You probably know Pete Johnson, who's our art director, handles all the art. Julie Johnson, without the T, is the contributing editor. Adam Harold, we refer to him as ABD. He does a lot of the circulation deals, almost big deals. But he's kind of out there looking at opportunities to get the magazine, and as if he doesn't have enough to do, he handles getting all the beer for the festivals. And then in the corner is our whole sales department, Amy Dalton, who we know quite well. So, really want to thank you for your time.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will send any DWI tickets to your office.
Nice. We'll be sure to send those right up to accounting. They'll love it.
And we'll look forward to round 2. Finish
Yeah,
up.
round 2 for sure. Let's make sure we get that scheduled.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Tommy,
Thanks,
thank
Tommy.
you.
Thank you,
guys.
Tommy.
Appreciate it. All right.